your world shrinks a little bit. You don't have the opportunity to cover a lot of ground because it's all on foot. You always are nervous when you put all the work into building a wall.
Deep in the frozen Alaskan wilderness, a lone trapline hut built by seasoned mountain man Marty Meierotto has become the center of a chilling mystery. When fellow trappers checked on his cabin after weeks of silence, what they found left them shaken and unwilling to speak. How could a man known for enduring brutal winters leave behind something far darker than the cold itself? The community remains gripped by fear and confusion. Each trip into the valley only deepens the enigma. What lies beneath that snow-covered roof? And why are those who know too afraid to tell? The Silent Cabin's discovery. When two experienced trappers journeyed deep into the Alaskan wilderness to check on Marty Meierotto's trapline hut, they found something far from ordinary. The small cabin, built with Marty's own hands, stood firm beneath a heavy blanket of snow, yet something felt disturbingly wrong. There were no fresh footprints, no signs of recent activity, and the door was slightly ajar. An unusual sight for a man known for strict orderliness. This eerie silence sealed the feeling that something had unsettled the balance in this secluded refuge. Inside the hut, the scene was chaotic. The table and stove were overturned, gear scattered as if someone had left in a hurry or tried to mask what had happened. Marty's coat and rifle, usually close at hand, were missing. The stove was cold, and a half-full mug of frozen water sat abandoned, small but telling signs of unusual absence. These details suggested a disruption so sudden and strange, it defied explanation. The two men who discovered the cabin exchanged uneasy glances. They'd known Marty long enough to recognize when something was out of place. His survival skills and routine were impeccable. Disorder in his home had no simple explanation. The cold, still air weighed heavily on them as they searched the cabin, but found no answers, only more questions. It was as if the hut was hiding something deep within its wooden walls. Closer to the back of the cabin, one trapper froze at the sight of something on the floor. His whispered warning came too late. Both men were confronted with a sight that left them speechless and rooted to the spot. Fear, not cold, gripped them as they stood silent for minutes that stretched into eternity. Whatever they encountered there was enough to send them retreating without a word, leaving the haunting mystery trapped inside. The trapper's radio message was brief but chilling. "We just found something dreadful in Marty Meierotto's trapline hut." Those words echoed quickly through the nearby community, stirring unease and speculation. People who had braved Alaskan storms, predators, and isolation found themselves rattled in a way they weren't prepared for. The wilderness had kept one of its darkest secrets, dropping a veil of silence over the cabin. Efforts to return to the cabin quickly met with resistance. The original trappers refused to go back, each citing a personal limit reached deep within their souls. The harsh terrain, the biting cold, and the unknown terror within those walls created a frontier no one wanted to face twice. The cabin became a symbol, not of survival, but of something long buried and perhaps best left undiscovered. Heavy snows soon buried the trails, swallowing the hut and cloaking the valley in silence once again. But rather than quieting the story, the snow seemed to amplify the questions. Why had Marty disappeared without a trace? And what had caused such an unsettling scene? The answers remained locked beneath the frozen forest canopy, leaving the community in a growing state of worry and fascination. The unsettling discovery of the cabin's interior deepens when we look closer at the man who lived there. His life, his routine, and why his absence sent ripples through an already tough community. Marty Meierotto's life and routine. Marty Meierotto was no stranger to the wild. Every winter, he lived off the grid in a primitive one-room log cabin set hundreds of miles away from any town or civilization. Known to disappear for weeks or even months, Marty had cultivated a life built on solitude, survival, and sheer resilience against the brutal Alaskan winters. He thrived in the silence and cold that would overwhelm most people in a single day. His neighbors in the remote region were often skeptical of him. Some admired his toughness, while others whispered suspicions born from his reclusive nature. Marty's very existence was an enigma. Viewers saw him on the show Mountain Men, where his grit and skill navigating relentless conditions earned him a reputation as one of Alaska's most formidable figures. Yet those who truly knew him understood his solitary life was both a choice and a necessity. Routine was Marty's anchor. Each day brought a relentless cycle of checking traps, repairing gear, and bracing against the wilderness's harsh mood swings. His logs and notes detailed weather, trap counts, and sketches of the terrain, evidence of meticulous planning and a deep connection to the land. Nothing was left to chance in his world, a testament to a man whose survival depended on order and precision. His cabin was not just a place to stay. It was a fortress against the elements and a spot where every item had its right use and right place. Marty's carefulness and habits concerning his living space were somehow the making of his survival strategies. He viewed even the very slightest signs of disorder or negligence as being out of his domain, and hence, the state of disarray existing in the cabin was all the more surprising to the visitors who happened to find it. Marty was a person who had an existence full of oppositions, and this was not only the case with his survival abilities. The severe nature of his surroundings, along with the loneliness, sometimes purified his character, but at other times, he became a riddle. He had very serious issues indeed, but only a handful of people were able to understand or even imagine what was going on in his mind in those hours of solitude. The logs that he left behind told only a small part of the interconnected and complex nature of the choices and happenings that were more than just living in the woods. The moment reports started to emerge that Marty had disappeared for several days, an aura of worry and fear pervaded the area. His friends, as well as fellow trappers, had a hard time being silent and not showing up at the usual places. In a region where survival was not only a matter of communication and routine, silence was indeed very concerning. With this understanding of Marty's life and character, the tale of the first men who dared approach the cabin becomes all the more compelling and unsettling. The first expedition's frightening encounter. When the first two trappers set out to check on Marty's cabin, their minds were heavy with questions and unease. The cold Alaskan air bit sharply, and the snow crunched loudly beneath their boots as they trudged through the sprawling wilderness. Silence was their only companion, broken only by the faint groan of frozen ground and whispers of wind weaving through ancient pines. Upon reaching the clearing where Marty's hut stood, they halted, snow piled high against its sagging roof, resting like a shroud. The absence of fresh tracks immediately unnerved them. Despite the harsh environment, no paths spoke of recent movement, as if the cabin had been abandoned or frozen in time. Their calls for Marty echoed unanswered, thick with tension and growing dread. The door stood ajar, which was unusual for Marty, known for barricading his space against the elements. Cautiously, one man brushed snow from the handle and pushed it open. The creak of the door seemed unnaturally prolonged, stretching into the stillness like a warning. Inside, the air hung cold and heavy, seeping into their bones, as the pale light slipping through cracks revealed a scene out of place. The interior was disarrayed, tables overturned, gear scattered, and the absence of Marty's coat and rifle struck a disquieting chord. The cold stove and a half-filled mug of frozen water told of recent use, but absence of presence. It resembled a place abandoned in haste or purposefully staged. The trappers' unease deepened as they grasped that what lay before them was no ordinary wilderness hardship. Then came the moment that froze them both. At the back of the hut, one man spotted something on the floor. His warning, barely a whisper, was overshadowed by a silent recognition that whatever it was dreadful and inexplicable. The sight left them speechless, not from cold, but something far heavier, a crushing dread that burrowed deep into their hearts. The two men lingered in tense silence, the quiet stretching as if to swallow them whole. With no words to explain the horror, they retreated and closed the cabin door behind them as the snow began falling more fiercely, erasing the tracks of their fearful exit. Once back at base camp, their radio message was short but unmistakable. They had found something dreadful inside Marty's hut. The news spread quickly, rippling through the tightly knit Alaskan community. People familiar with facing nature's threats sensed an uncommon terror, igniting questions and fears that only grew heavier in the gathering cold. The uneasy tension surrounding Marty's cabin only thickens as a larger search party sets out to uncover what secrets remain buried beneath its frozen roof. The search party's return visit. The tension surrounding Marty Meierotto's Trapline hut only deepened as a larger search party prepared to revisit the mysterious site. This new team comprised 3 locals familiar with the unforgiving terrain and a wildlife officer who had once worked alongside Marty. They packed lightly: ropes, flashlights, water, ready for a cautious but thorough investigation. Although none spoke it aloud, all silently wondered what could have unsettled the first 2 trappers so profoundly. The journey was harsh, despite the melting snow. Icy patches and deep drifts challenged their every step. When they arrived at the clearing, the hut appeared as silent and frozen as before, half buried beneath a thick layer of snow. The wind swept across the roof, almost as if nature itself wished to erase the cabin from memory. One member shut off his snowmobile engine and paused, sensing an oppressive stillness hanging in the air. The moment they reached the door, tiny particles of dust danced in the weak light coming from outside and settled down in the silent room. It was as if everything had been stopped. The chair that had fallen over, tools lying around, and Marty's jacket that was incongruously clean on the floor close to a window. The rifle had still not been found, which was in line with earlier reports, but other incidents indicated that the place had been occupied very recently. The ashes in the stove were cold, which indicated that the fire had been stoked days ago. Thus, the lack of footprints outside was questioned. The wildlife officer conducted a very detailed and extensive inspection of the room and, spotting something very light on the floor, the traces were wooden floor. These marks do not at all belong to a person or to their daily life, nor did they resemble the traditional woodwork, scratching by tools, but instead seemed to suggest that a huge object had been dragged and then halted all of a sudden. The officer's light caught a small flash of something bright for a moment, and he immediately turned it off, allowing his face to express how irritated he was. He had no justification for his actions when he ordered the group to leave right away. Their exit was characterized by silence and slowness, the heaviness of discomfort tearing them down like the cold mountain air. They did not speak for quite a while when they finally emerged into the dim light. One person eventually asked the officer what he had seen and broke the silence only after they had already gone past the clearing. The officer's answer came very slowly and hesitatingly. It was not something he was preparing to explain, at least not in the near future. The men's broken story, when they came back to town, was a major source of questions rather than answers. They described the cabin as dirty, suggested slaying, and then spoke of it indirectly. The silent interaction among them was a very strong one. The type of interaction that could only be through a secret that was better off locked in the heart of the frozen forest. Word of mouth about the incident spread quickly, and the atmosphere around the cabin, which was already mysterious, turned increasingly darker. In the following days, a pilot flying over the area noticed a small amount of smoke coming from the roof of the hut, but when he landed, he found the place cold and empty. These contradictions only added to the fear of the community and converted Marty's cabin, which was once a marker of nature's wildness, into a ghost space that only a few would dare to resort to. The fragile barrier that marked the line between nature and the secrets had become more dangerous than anyone had imagined. The lingering unease surrounding Marty's trapline hut gave rise to changing local perceptions and rumors that shaped the wider community's reaction. Local rumors and reactions. The mystery of Marty Meierotto's trapline hut spread quickly through the Alaskan community, evolving from a missing person case into something far more unsettling. Conversations in town shifted away from Marty himself and toward the unspoken secrets tied to his cabin, secrets no one seemed willing to confront directly. Neighbors shared fragmented stories, each version different, but threaded with the same unease. Some insisted a note had been found, a brief and cryptic message hinting at Marty's final state of mind. Few had seen it clearly, yet its rumored words, "I had to do it, I had no other option, that was it," circulated widely, deepening the sense of dread. Speculation flourished. Some believed Marty had been hiding from someone or something. Others whispered about darker acts that might have occurred inside the hut. A few claimed the place itself felt alive with a terrible secret, transforming from a symbol of survival into a space people instinctively feared. The uncertainty cast the cabin as a kind of invisible trap, one better avoided than understood. Even Marty's longtime friends grew tight-lipped, reluctant to discuss him or the search that followed his disappearance. Newcomers learned quickly to tread lightly when the subject surfaced. Trails leading to the hut, once traveled by trappers and snowmobilers, became avoided paths marked only by an unspoken boundary. Late-night sightings fueled the growing tension. Several people reported brief flickering lights near the hut's location, glimmers that vanished when anyone approached. At first, skeptics dismissed the stories, but as more witnesses came forward, even the doubters grew quiet. The unexplained lights raised unsettling questions. Was someone still out there? Or was the cabin's lingering presence manifesting in ways no one wanted to explain? Local authorities remained guarded, acknowledging rumors but offering no clarity. The wildlife officer who had joined the search soon withdrew from public life, and those who had accompanied him seemed changed, quieter, withdrawn, carrying a weight that followed them home. Their silence became one more sign that whatever happened at the trapline hut had left an imprint too deep to discuss. The weight of unanswered questions presses down, setting the stage for the profound impact this mystery has left on everyone connected to the cabin and the wilderness that claimed its secrets. The unseen secret's lingering impact. Silence still hangs over Marty Meierotto's trapline hut, a weight that deepens with each unanswered question. Despite investigations, no clear explanation has emerged for what disturbed the cabin or why those who found it were so shaken. Something unseen seems to linger in that frozen valley, casting a long shadow over a wilderness known for danger, but not for fear. Those who approached the hut returned altered, quiet, pale and burdened in ways they struggled to describe. A wildlife officer who once worked with Marty withdrew from the woods entirely, as did others involved in the search. Their changed behavior suggests that whatever occurred in the cabin left an emotional or spiritual imprint, rather than a physical threat. Locals uphold a rule of silence, a kind of respect for things that cannot speak for themselves. One searcher warned, "You will see things you are not allowed to talk about," echoing the community's refusal to acknowledge the cabin's darkness. This silence preserves peace, yet it fuels curiosity among outsiders and raises the question of what truths remain buried where human endurance meets unforgiving nature. Speculation continues to thrive. Some say that Marty had a secret that was too big to be revealed, and it consequently led him to live a solitary life. Others think that there might have been an intruder, or that somehow it was just a supernatural occurrence. The occasional flickering lights close to the hut have been associated with tales either of spirits who have not departed or the dead being still around, very much mixing up the concepts of reality and myths. When wilderness is such a strong factor in character formation, the unknown becomes narrative very easily. Marty's legacy is a mirror of this intricacy. For his power and self-sufficiency, he was praised, but his memory is now carried on by whispering conversations that always come back to the hut and its mysteries. Even the strongest admit that, at times, they are overpowered by mysteries that are beyond comprehension. The path to the cabin is now hidden completely by the seasonal snows, but the story still comes up every winter as the cold does. The cabin is still there today, a symbol of the unbelievable human strength displayed by will and the thin line that separates fear from knowledge, a representation of the myths that endure in darkness and silence. The authorities stay away from the scene and link their presence to the danger and lack of evidence, their calm tone being in stark contrast to the community's anxiety. At the same time, the people nearest to Marty each have pieces of his diaries, trying to make sense of the confusing comments that seem to point to desperation and hard choices. Marty Meierotto's Trapline hut is more than a forgotten shelter in the Alaskan wild. It's a chilling testament to survival, secrecy, and the unspoken. The strange signs left behind, and the silence that followed, remind us that not every story reveals its full truth. If this mystery pulled you in, be sure to like and subscribe for more explorations into the world's hidden shadows. And watch the next video shown on the screen for the continuation of this unsettling journey.